Okay, welcome to lecture number 3 for the first unit here. The third lecture this time around is going to be on the characteristics of living things. We're going to spend a day talking about these and you guys get in class and going over some examples of how they can be applied to different species. But I want to first go through them with you so you have a good idea of what they are when you get into class. So, for our first characteristic of life, actually, before we start that, we'll just go through all of them. So, what, let's get my pen here. What does it mean to be living? That's the question you got to ask yourself. What does it mean to be living? And when you look at a living thing, what characteristics does it have? Pretty much, scientists have agreed that what it means to be living consists of 7 things. First thing is that it's made of cells. Second thing is that it can reproduce. Sometimes that's just a cell. The third thing is that it maintains a constant state of regularity. We'll go over what that means. Pass on its genes to its offspring. That it relies on other species for survival. And then 7, that the population of organisms or the species slowly evolves over time through a process called natural selection. So let's go over these in more detail. First thing, we've got cellular organization. This was number 1. Right here. And to sum this up, basically, all living things are made of cells. If they are not made of cells, then they're not considered living. What is a cell? It's a highly organized, membrane-bound structure with tiny structures in it. You may remember these from other classes in your past. So a nucleus would be something. A mitochondria would be another thing. We'll go over what those do later. A cell is basically a tiny structure that makes up your body. You have trillions of these in your body. That's kind of hard to picture, but if you were to do a calculation right now and think of like how many seconds old are you, you wouldn't even hit 1 billion. Okay, so a trillion is truly amazing. A lot of cells. We've also come to the conclusion as scientists that a cell is the smallest unit capable of life. So the smallest you can go if you're looking at something living is going to be a cell. This is an animal cell. Here are all of the what looks like mitochondria. Here, we got a membrane on the outside. The nucleus is somewhere here. I don't really see it right now. But anyways, this is a picture of a cell. It also looks like ejecting waste out the side of it because you see all of these little packets of material being ejected or removed from the cell. So it looks like this cell is getting rid of something. Anyways, let's move on to the next one. Next one's going to be reproduction. The second thing that we talked about in the first, all living things can reproduce. What does that mean? Well, reproduction is a process in which organisms make more of their own kind from one generation to the next. This includes sexual reproduction and asexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction is where organisms combine their genes, okay, which deals with combining genes or your DNA to mix with another person's or organisms to make more offspring. Asexual reproduction is where you clone your DNA and you give an exact copy to your offspring. So asexual would look something like this, where you have one organism here that breaks up into 2 here, and now we've got 2 organisms, 1 and 2. Bacteria will do this. being that they're one-celled organisms, when they reproduce, they just split into two. With sexual reproduction, this kind of looks like the same thing, but think of it as another organism. You have two different organisms come together, exchange genetic information, and then at the end of it, they have a new offspring. And you know what? This picture really does not do a very good job describing sexual reproduction. So you could just think of it kind of as organism 1 combines with organism 2, their genome. Okay, let me draw a better picture of that. Sorry, guys. So the genes get combined into a new organism, but they're still around. These two organisms are still around. So you are combining genes to make a new organism. Okay? So that's reproduction. Next one is going to be the use of energy. How do you get through your day? Well, one major piece of is to eat. Why do you eat? Because you need the molecules in the food to provide you with energy. So, living things carry out chemical reactions. All of that is in you. It's called respiration. Energy. The processes of your life. Okay? You need carbohydrates. Those break down into energy. You need protein. You need some fats and lipids. And all of those things together, so if we write them down here, proteins, carbs, and fats, all of those things combined will give you the energy you need to make it through your day. Okay? A metabolism, or your metabolism, is calculated by how quickly you do those chemical reactions. How quickly do you break down all of these things to energy? If you tend to not break them down as fast, you would say you have a slow metabolism. If you break them down very quickly, you'd say you have a faster one. And then, last kind of cool point here is that all energy, almost all energy used by living organisms starts from the sun. Remember, plants use energy from the sun to actually power their chemical reactions. So almost all energy on Earth starts in plants, and that energy comes from the sun. So we'll diagram that out in a little bit here, but it's kind of cool to think about. The majority of your energy that you eat every day has come from the sun, which is really cool. All right, next thing is homeostasis. Right? It's not cold out right now, but when you go outside in the winter, what do you wear? You wear a hat and a coat, and you bundle up. Why do you do that? Because you have to stay a certain temperature. All living organisms must maintain a stable environment in order to function properly. So organisms that live in a colder environment, let's say a bear, will have a lot of fur to keep them warm throughout the colder months. Okay. Homeostasis is that process of maintaining a stable environment, and you do that all the time. So when it comes to winter, you dress warm. When it comes to summer, you don't dress as warm. You are constantly eating to maintain a level of sugar in your blood. And I could go on for a long time, but that's the kind of thing, those are the kinds of things you do in order to keep yourself at homeostasis. Okay? So homeostasis, you're constantly trying to be or remain the same. All right, next thing, which was number 5, I believe, was heredity. This dealt with your DNA, which is a picture right there, or your genetics. All living things pass traits to their offspring, whether it's they're cloning it and giving an exact copy, or they're mixing it up with another person or organism and giving that to their offspring. They're always passing on their DNA. So a gene, which we'll talk about later, is a basic unit of heredity. You have 21,000 genes. So, for example, you have a few genes for height, Depending on how you inherit those genes from your parents, you could be a tall person or a short person. Okay? Heredity is passing on those traits from parents to offspring. So if your parents had a lot of tall height genes, then they would give those to you, and you would be tall. So that's heredity. We'll talk a little bit more about DNA when we get to the DNA unit. This is one molecule of DNA, but we will come back to that when we're talking about structure. Next thing is going to be evolution, and I believe we'll deal with this. Anyway, so we've got number 6 here, which is evolution. Evolution deals with species, okay? It's important that you remember you do not evolve, okay? Your species does. So over the course of a long period of time, and we're talking millions of years, a species will evolve, okay? What does that mean? Well, in a nutshell, and we're not going to get into this too deeply today, evolution is change in a species over time. And the way that works, the way change occurs, is based on natural selection. So nature is going to select which individuals can reproduce the most, and whichever organisms have the most kids, those traits will get passed on more often than others. So the species will slowly look more and more and more and more like the individuals with the best traits. And those traits then will move out throughout the rest of the population. So we'll get into that a little bit more later. But the focus here is that evolution is species changing over time. Okay? Animals, organisms that you're familiar with right now have not always looked like that. And they may not have even been around, a few million years ago. So species change over time, and they get different adaptations. We'll get into more of that later, but that's the takeaway here. Okay? Last one is interdependence. All organisms survive and reproduce with the help of other organisms. The best way to visualize this is by looking at a food web. Okay? Species rely on each other for food and shelter. Take a look at the squirrel right here. The squirrel eats the acorns from the oak tree. It also can live in the tree, okay, or near the tree. But then it is food for owls and foxes and other organisms in the environment. So not only is the squirrel relying on the oak tree, but the top predators here, the foxes and the other raptor birds, those are relying on the squirrel for food, or the bunny, or the shrew, or the mouse, okay? All of those organisms are food. So main takeaway from here is organisms survive and reproduce with the help of each other. You can't do it alone, okay? Even plants will rely on the nitrogen in the soil from other organisms to be able to do a lot of their chemical processes. So even though plants may use the sun for energy, they are also using things in their environment to do the rest of the chemical reactions they need to do. Finish it for 7. You may be asking yourself, then, what is non-living? What can we consider non-living? Well, a non-living is something like water. Okay, water does not reproduce. Sunlight does not reproduce. It's not made of cells. Okay, water vapor, which is cloud. Different things in your environment that you may rely on, but are not actually living, could be some of these. So we'll talk a little bit more about this in class. To review, we've got our 7 here. Every living organism is going to have these 7 characteristics of life. So when you get back into class, we'll review how those things can be exhibited in some examples. And then if you have any questions, we can go over those then. Okay? Thank you for watching, and I will see you in class.